The Trump administration stands squarely at the center of two major negotiations. First, we're talking about ending the war between Israel and Hamas and ending the war between Ukraine and Russia. The rush to stop the fighting sparked some pushback from some U.S. allies. They feel Trump has iced them out of any peace plans. Now, just moments ago, Secretary of State Marco Rubio sat down with the Saudi Arabian Crown Prince to figure out a starting point for a deal between Presidents Putin and Zelensky. Those meetings are expected to continue tomorrow. The State Department says Rubio will be joined by National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Notably not at the table this week is Ukraine. Speaking to reporters this morning, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said, quote, Ukraine will not take part and did not know anything about it. Zelensky held his own meeting with leaders of United Arab Emirates today instead. Today also marks 500 days since the start of the war between Israel and Hamas. Hamas launched its attack on Israel on October 7th of 2023, and that resulted in about 1,200 deaths and 251 people who were taken hostage. In those 500 days, more than 48,000 people have been killed in Gaza. So let's bring in CBS News White House reporter Willie James Enman from West Palm Beach, Florida. Willie, thank you for joining us again at this hour. What's the latest on Trump's role in this Gaza ceasefire deal?
Hey there. Well, the commander-in-chief might be here in West Palm Beach, but behind the scenes, the White House is working to make sure the second part of that deal, phase 2, is implemented. And we saw, of course, White House officials visiting and meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The president has also said that he wants to turn Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East, saying that somehow the United States would take possession of the Palestinian territory. Now, there have been fierce pushback from members of various nations, Middle Eastern nations in the region, just saying that that will not happen, that you cannot displace some 2 million Palestinians as you rebuild Gaza. But nonetheless, this is perhaps being viewed as a negotiation tactic. President Trump says something, and then Middle Eastern leaders, those leaders of the nations of Qatar and Egypt and Jordan, can perhaps come up with some type of plan to offer some solution, some long-term solution for a Palestinian state or for the safety of the Palestinians. But nonetheless, the president is saying this. Prime Minister Netanyahu seemingly on board with this message as well. But one key thing here is that the Prime Minister and the President, they sound the same when they talk about the deal with Hamas, that all hell will break loose, to kind of sum up the quotes that we're hearing coming from both men, if Hamas doesn't hold up its end of the deal and turn over those Israeli hostages. Although we, of course, did see a few hostages come from Hamas this past weekend, and one of those hostages included, former hostages, I should say, included a dual Israel and American citizen, Mugo.
Okay, Willie, I want to switch gears here, talking about the Trump administration. They want to remove the person who leads the Office of Special Counsel, and that's the agency that protects whistleblowers. That case is now in the hand of the Supreme Court. So what does Trump want here, and why is he even fighting for this?
Yeah, that's right. This individual by the name of Hampton Dillinger is pushing back and fighting at the court level to essentially stop his firing. Now, we did see a lower court ruling that was essentially on his side of things. The president looking to exert his executive power so he can be able to fire Mr. Dillinger. Part of the reason Dillinger is pushing back is he says he's arguing that he can only be fired for problems with his job performance, and that in the notification and the letter that he received terminating his employment, that was not mentioned. That wasn't the case. So we anticipate perhaps some type of response from the Supreme Court acknowledging this case. It's a holiday today, so perhaps the earliest the Supreme Court could potentially weigh in on this is tomorrow on Tuesday. And I'll also mention as well, Mugo, the president's agenda, the president's executive authority, everything from relating to immigration, relating to firing of government employees, like in this case, really has just been tied up in legal limbo. And Democrats really haven't been able to fight this at the congressional level. They don't control the House or the Senate. And this is one of those ways where individuals, including politicians, are pushing back, including attorneys general from several states, pushing back on the president's not only just his immigration plan, but also Elon Musk and Doge, and how much access and information they have in terms of getting access to Americans' personal information through different government agencies. That's tied up in the courts as well.
And Willie, I want to stay on the topic of firings here because we know that we also have our eye on the firing of federal employees. The White House told agencies to give their final reports on the number of workers fired by tomorrow. So can you give us some insight here into just how extensive all of this is?
Yeah, it's really wide-ranging. You have multiple government agencies affected by this, the CDC, you have the Forestry Service, you have the Department of Education, thousands of probationary employees, and those are those employees that are have been on the job for about a year or two, where their employment is up for debate, so to speak. That's probably not the best way to describe it, but probationary mean you're on probation, that you can be let go for some type of reason. And in this case, the Trump administration seemingly letting go of thousands of these government employees as a cost-saving method, as a way to save the government money. We know that Doge, the Department of Government and Efficiency, that task force led by billionaire Elon Musk, really has had their hand in this, going into different government agencies. And sometimes there have been some reversals. In fact, the agency that oversees the protection and of the nuclear weapons and nuclear waste, there was a backtracking of sorts where reportedly more than 300 employees were fired, and then there was a notice that went out that said, wait, we're only going to let go of about 30 or so employees. We want everybody else to come back, perhaps an about face for all of these cost-cutting measures. And Elon Musk mentioned this, apparently seemingly talking about mistakes being made, and they're going to work to correct those mistakes pretty quickly. Unclear about whether they're admitting this was a mistake, but clearly it's one of those actions and those reasons why Democrats say you cannot have just across-the-board cuts and cut certain individuals from their employment, because those roles are simply too important for the function of government or for the protection of certain types of things, in this case, nuclear weapons and nuclear waste.
All right, Willie, one more question for you before you go. We know the White House says the administration has a plan to tackle the price of eggs. We've been talking about this for a very long time now. It starts with addressing the bird flu. National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett had this to say to Margaret Brennan on Face the Nation. Let's listen to that.
What we need to do is have better ways with biosecurity and medication and so on to make sure that the perimeter doesn't have to kill the chickens. We have a better, smarter perimeter. And so having a smart perimeter is what we're working on, and we're finalizing the ideas about how to do that with the best scientists in government.
So, Willie, nearly 25% of the personnel involved with solving the bird flu outbreak has been fired by the Trump administration. So the big question here is, are Trump's efforts to reshape the government affecting his ability to bring down prices and reduce the spread of the bird flu?
On bird flu, I'll answer that part first. There's been some reporting from Politico. The director of the Wisconsin Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory essentially said that letting go of their probationary staff at this department within the USDA that monitors and tests for bird flu will affect how they're able to respond to the virus. And in terms of those prices, Hassett has mentioned that they're trying to go about this a little bit differently, not necessarily culling, what's called culling the chicken flock, but perhaps to go about this in a more strategic way. Maybe that would involve vaccinations of some of these birds. Maybe that would involve only isolating a part of the flock, but we don't yet know. USDA policy is when you have this type of infection that the majority of the flock, or if not all, is culled. So part of the effort, we'll just have to wait and see how the White House responds to this. But experts are already pointing out, if you let go of these probationary employees that are testing or helping with the testing and taking in the laboratory results and all of that, you're going to have an effect on how you respond to this virus.
All right, Willie James Inman, thank you so much for joining us once again on the stream today. We so appreciate your time.